Hi, I'm Alex Galassi, and I'm the author of Battle for Eklatros, Book 1 in the Rebalancing the Cosmos series. I started writing this book in April of 2019, but I've been writing on and off throughout my entire life. And actually, this story dates back to when I was about 7 or 8 years old, maybe even younger than that. And I'll be getting into that a little bit more in a bit. Um, I also want to say that I am a Colorado native, and I've lived in Colorado my entire life. I've lived all around the state. Well, not really all around the state, just like Denver metro area. So like Centennial, Highlands Ranch, lived in Boulder, and when I lived in Boulder, I did frequent the Boulder bookstore. It's a great place to be, definitely. Um, and now I live in Aurora, Colorado. But yeah, Colorado has always been my home. I love it here. The first question is, can you give us a very brief synopsis of your book without spoilers, of course? So I'm, uh, my book is always a little bit hard to describe in my mind. It is a definitely a epic fantasy novel with science fiction elements. So we have a fantasy world, and the world is called Eklatros. But right now there's aliens that are invading the planet. And actually, the aliens have been here before. The aliens were first seen on Eklatros about a few thousand years or so before the main events, and but now they're back. The aliens are back, and they're here to finish the job that they did not finish the first time that they were here. So the main character is Anifa, and behind me on the poster, she's the one. I don't know how well you can see it, but she's kind of jumping on the cover. Here is it again. This is Anifa. She is the first elf seen on Eklatros in since around the time that the aliens were last seen on Eklatros. So for a few thousand years, there have been no sightings of elves, and suddenly she shows up. She meets Theodore and Cecil, who are again the um, other two main characters on the cover. We got Theodore and Cecil, and then her party grows from there as they travel together. They meet other people, and they kind of come together. And their mission is to save Eklatros from the invading aliens. There are also 5 interlude chapters that jump to a completely different planet. Um, there are 8 of those. Sorry, there are 5 of those, each one being like on the 8th chapter. So chapter 8, 16, 24, and so forth. So, and those characters feature Nabok's Clumes mainly, and one of the other professors as they work on creating the first, as at least for Nabok's, Professor Clumes, he's working on creating some of the first cyborgs seen in the Vortex solar system. Um, and while it seems like they're kind of 2 separate stories, they're actually very related. And so you have to wait until the end of the book to see how everything connects. So what inspired me to write this book? As I kind of mentioned in my intro, the story started developing when I was 7 or 8 years old. That's just the age range that I put it to. I was quite young. I can't say if that was, I could have been younger, could have been older. I don't know. I was young. Playing with Legos is how the story started. Actually, Nabokis is the original character, the original super main character from the stories. I still have all the original Legos. So like this is Nabokis right here, his black wing. So yeah, Nabokis, and then some of the other ones from the Vortex solar system were the other kind of originals Lego characters. I have quite a number of Lego characters, but the only other ones I'll mention for Vortex right now is Norman. So he has his big tank gun. and then West, who was introduced in chapter 2016. And Norman is introduced in chapter 24. But aside from those Lego characters, I also have some kind of newer meaning like 2019 ish. So still quite a while ago, but Theodore and Cecil are from around that age. This is Theodore, and this is Cecil's Lego character. So again, the story originally revolved around Nabokov, but I wanted to kind of start it off different. The second book actually really focuses on Nabokov, but this book I wanted to do way more of a fantasy because while I read mostly sci-fi, I'm a big fan of fantasy, like Final Fantasy video games. So this book is actually very based off of Final Fantasy in the sense that Anifa and kind of meets all these people and kind of gathers her party in a similar vein as the Final Fantasy games, these traditional Final Fantasy games like 7, 9, 6, and so forth. Okay, so what came first, the world of Equitross or the characters? As I kind of explained, the characters came first for the most part. There are very few characters that I created for this book specifically, mostly minor characters like Sage Mason and Charlotte, but most of them are older Lego-based characters or characters that I came up with when I was creating the first versions of the story, because again, I've written multiple iterations of this. It's changed so much since back then, since I was 7 or 8 years old to become what it is today. But yeah, I also wanted to mention that I didn't mention in the previous answer that this book did start off being a video game. I started trying to build it out as a RPG Maker video game, but it got too complicated, and so it became a book. So there are other like video game influences to my book, but it's definitely not lit RPG. It's epic fantasy. Okay. All right. So can you tell us about your world building process? So again, since the story is so old, it's really hard for me to describe because a lot of the aspects of the story are very old. So like the Vortex solar system, as I've been kind of mentioning, that was again the original setting of this story. Equitross is definitely newer, and Equitross as the planet itself was built or created pretty much just for this book. So in that sense, as I kind of mentioned earlier, and I mean in the previous answer or so, I started building this out as the video game, in an RPG Maker, and because of that, I had the world map already built out before I started writing the book, which was very helpful. And from there, I just had to go with all the cities and places and forests and mountains and give all those names and stuff. But because I already had the world kind of created, it was easy to write the story for me because I mean I'm definitely more of a plotter than a pantser. While there are aspects that of the story, even in this book, where how plotted out it was, there are some aspects that just were born from just writing it. But anyway, that all being said, yeah, just I guess again because I've just been creating this world like my whole life, it is difficult. Okay, I'm not going to say that creating world is not difficult, but it's just I've had practice, so I kind of know what I'm doing, and yeah, I'm just gonna honestly probably continue to use RPG Maker as my map building program because it's great to just lay out maps that way. Okay, so the next question is, do I have any more adventures in store for Nifa, Theodore, and Cecil? Um, I can't fully answer this question without giving away spoilers. What I can say is that half of Aniffa's party does continue on the journey, and so they'll definitely be seen in book two, while the other half of the party does not continue on with the journey, as they have their own reasons for not continuing on. They will be seen in the story again in the future, maybe not book two, but they will be seen again. But so I have to be vague again. Some of the characters of the main party will be moving on. Some of them won't be, but either way, they will all be seen again down the line. So, and that kind of being said, even though I do have the second book and what planned out, and there will be more than that I'm not actually sure how many books there are going to be, because the story is quite big in my mind. I think I am gonna maybe try to do some side stories with certain characters whose kind of storylines don't fit into the main storyline. So maybe down the line we'll also see like side stories from some of the characters as well. So I have some things in mind for those that again don't fit into the main story. All right, so what are a couple of books you read during the pandemic that you really loved? So yeah, I do have to admit I don't read as much as I should. Um, I do feel like I'm quite busy, but I do also understand that's an excuse. Um, I do need to read more. That being said, I did read some good books during the pandemic. My favorite trilogy I read during that is called The Universe After by Drew Williams, and the first book in that series is called The Stars Now Unclaimed. Um, while I don't really like first person, because I mean I prefer books written in third person, that whole series was written in first person, but it was just, in my opinion, the story was really good. The characters are really well written, so it didn't even matter. It was first person to me. It was a great series. That's science fiction again. Like as I mentioned earlier, I read way more science fiction than I do fantasy. Um, I also did read a lot of like manga and like comics. So I read some like Marvel comics and stuff, and a lot of like Pokemon manga from the Pokemon Adventures series, because I mean I love Pokemon, and the Pokemon Adventures manga starring like red, green, blue, gold, all of them. Super good story. Um, yeah, very well done. Is there anything else you want us to know about your book? Um, yeah, I mean, this is my first book that I published. As I kind of mentioned, I wrote many different versions of this story. Like this is probably the fifth to seventh different current version. So it took a long time for me to really get the characters down, really get the story down, and yeah, so much of it has changed, but at the same time, some of it is still the same basic like story that I was writing when I was, developing when I was super young. And yeah, I mean, my author journey has just been quite interesting so far. Being a first-time author, a lot of this is kind of new. I mean, it's all kind of new to me. It's just a learning experience. And but the Boulder Bookstore and the opportunity to not only do this interview, to get my book onto the shelves in the Boulder Bookstore is huge. And really, I can't thank them enough for the opportunities that they have given me. It's been really awesome. Okay, so last, I'm gonna read a passage from my book. This is in chapter 10, like a page or so into chapter 10. Um, yeah, again, Battle for Equitross, chapter 10. Quiet, Theodore, Kniffer whispered. Something is coming. Enifa motioned toward Theodore, and they silently approached Dosh and Cecil. What is it? Dosh asked, without looking away. Enifa focused her eyes and examined the path they were on. After a moment, she spotted them. 3 snow foxes. They were small and hunched low to the ground, but they were moving fast. She could immediately tell that they were not normal snow foxes, but had been reanimated by the new Ellery. 3 snow foxes moving fast, Enifa whispered to her comrades. Wait, they've stopped. I see them too now, Dosh whispered as he unslung the backpack and threw it into the grass. Yeah, it's hard to focus on them, but I saw the movement stop, Cecil whispered as he brushed his burgundy hair out of his eyes. Why did they stop? Theodore inquired. It almost looks like they're waiting for something. Keep an eye out, everyone, Enifa urged. She held her focus on the foxes while the others scanned the area. After a moment, she heard Theodore gasp in shock. The 3 snow foxes bounded swiftly towards them. The foxes are coming. Quickly, Enifa yelled. The reinforcements come from above. By the gods, Enifa, look up, Theodore exclaimed, his voice seeped in terror. Enifa tore her eyes from the 3 foxes and realized they had only been a distraction from the real threat. A massive cloud of crows approached from the north. The murder looked to be nearly 500 strong. I will handle the foxes. Everyone else, please keep us from being torn to shreds, Dosh commanded as he unsheathed his sword. Theodore, help me out here, Enifa cried as she unslung her bow and quickly drew a notch and arrow. With pleasure, with pleasure, Theodore sprang into action. Enifa shot her arrow the next moment. At the same time, Theodore shot a stream of fire into the arrowhead, infusing it with an explosive punch. The arrow flew true and hit a crow in its small, reanimated body. Upon impact, the crow exploded and took nearly 4 others down with it. We need something stronger than that. They're nearly upon us, Cecil exclaimed while waving his battle axe in the air wildly. Theodore, do that thing you did on Sortuga when you were hammered on that barley wine. I told you never to speak of that, Theodore said with a twinkle in his eye. Suddenly, one of the foxes was on top of Dosh. Enifa saw him fall to the ground, but a moment later he had wrestled himself out from under the snow fox and sliced its belly open from its tail to its throat. Enifa watched all this unfold out of the corner of her eye as she was focusing on quickly shooting individual crows. It was inefficient, and she was running through arrows fast, but it was all she could do. She didn't dare try to do what she did at Charlotte's. She couldn't allow her energy to be drained again. Instead, she had to keep her cool and finish this with the help of her new friends. But the murder of crows was nearly upon them. The deep snarl of a snow fox interrupted her thoughts. Dosh cried out in pain and crumpled to the ground as both snow foxes leapt onto him. The moment he went down, an electromagnetic pulse shot out of Theodore's staff and into the air above them. The burst of electricity went off like a bomb, felling dozens of crows, but there were still hundreds left. Cecil let out a battle cry and rushed towards Dosh. A snarling snow fox turned in his direction and bounded towards him. Cecil lunged forward and swung his battle axe, catching the fox on the side of its head. Cecil slammed the fox to the ground with a loud crunch, lifted his battle axe, and buried it into its exposed stomach. Blood sprayed under his armor as he glanced toward Dosh. The man from the past was flat on his back, holding back the final snarling fox with his sword clenched in the beast's mouth. Before Cecil could react, Dosh tore the sword out of the fox's mouth and stabbed it in the eye with the dagger. Dosh squinted as the fox clapped onto him. Help me up, Dosh asked as black blood poured onto his face. Cecil rushed over and shoved the fox off of Dosh, then held out a hand to help him onto his feet. Everyone, I think we need to run for it, Enifa cried. While Dosh and Cecil had been focusing on the final snow fox, Enifa and Theodore had been throwing everything they could at the oncoming murder of death. She was down to her last 12 arrows and knew she had to make every one count. So if you want to find out what happens and how they make it out of that battle and the other battles they may face, read my book, Battle for Equitros, by me, Alex Galassi. Thank you for watching, and yeah, I appreciate it.